Hello and welcome back. This is part 2 of our series on conflict management skills. And once again, I put up my yellow slide here. Has it made you angry yet? I hope not. Once again, like I mentioned before, yellow has a tendency to make people mad. Or maybe, you remember I gave you the example about my wife and I arguing about pizza or about burritos, Italian food, or maybe it's about Mexican food. And I said mutual gains. We got together, we worked, we collaborated, we got together, and we turned out happy. And then I showed you the picture of my house, which of course was not my house. But maybe in the process I made you mad by saying, my gosh, look at the house this guy lives in. Okay, I'm just kidding about my little bungalow there. But today we want to go into talking about that everyone has a different type of conflict style. And there are 5 styles: the competing, competitive style, the compromising, the collaborating, the avoiding, and the accommodating. And we'll go through these fairly quickly. And there's some online exams you can take. This is called the Thomas Kilmann conflict management style. And they have what's called the Thomas Kilmann conflict inventory. And I would encourage you to go online, Google it, Thomas Kilmann, K-I-L-M-A-N-N, and take the online assessment after we go through this. I don't get any benefits. I don't get any, this is not like a paid endorsement. It's just that they have actually come up with the very best way to determine your conflict style, and it's really worth it for you to see through their scientific exam how you can determine what your conflict style is. And once we get through this, I think you're going to see that there's some great value in that. So there are these 5 styles of disagreement that we can use. Competitive, as a person says, I do what I do to get what I want. Maybe you know people like that. Collaborative people, they're the ones saying mutual respect for each other and working together to resolve the problem. We're going to work together to resolve the problem. Compromising people will each give up something to get something. I'll give you this if you give me that. The avoidant person is a person who says, you know what, maybe the other person, or maybe the problem will just go away if I don't do that. I stick my head in the sand like an ostrich. Accommodative person is the person who says differences can be minimized so that harmony is maintained. So the accommodative person is basically going to sit there and say, whatever you want, I'll do it. I just don't want to have an argument. I just want to stay out of that conflict. Well, like I said, this is called the Thomas Kilmann, and they actually go in there, and if you look at this, they put these things on a grid of assertiveness and cooperative. You can see how they're in there. I'm going to show you a little better screen here of it. And this is the way you can see a little bit more about how people react and based upon what they're looking for. So for example, if you look at the left side, you see high on self or low on self. On the bottom, going across the horizontal, it says low on others or high on others. So it's others and self. So if you look at someone who's competitive, that top left there, they are high on their self, but they're low on the others. They're more concerned about themselves than the others. The opposite of that is the accommodative person, who is very high on the other but very low on themselves. They're more concerned about making other people happy and not about their self. And of course, the avoidant person is low in self, low on others too. I'm just going to avoid the situation. They're not going to feel good about it, and the other people don't feel good about it either. So let's look at each one of these and talk just a little bit about them, because the competitive, what does a competitive person do? Now, these are the extremes. I want to make that very, very clear to you. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, these are the extremes. The competitive person, they'll make verbal attacks. They'll do these knee-jerk type of reactions. They'll do personal criticism. Remember some of the examples I gave you is that, you know, you always get your way. You always make bad decisions. They're making a constant rejection of idea. Competitive person, if you give them an idea, they don't like it, they're going to make a rejection of it. And they're going to say, why would we ever do that? You need to do what I say. This is my idea. They'll make presumptive remarks. They'll deny responsibility for anything going wrong. And they do what's called stream shifting, which is very interesting. If you don't know what stream shifting is, that means basically changing the topic or topic management. So for example, I'm going to give you the example of my cousin. My cousin is a very, very competitive person. And he will have a tendency sometimes to go in there and to try to say, and one time we actually worked together in the same company, and he would say, you know, we need to go in there and cut everyone's pay by 10%. And I would go in there and say, well, I just don't know if we should do that. Maybe what we should be doing is going in there and finding other ways to cut the cost. And I think we should get rid of the coffee. And see, he doesn't like that because I have taken the power away from him and I brought it in myself. And he will come back and he will say, you're always looking for other things instead of looking at things that make the biggest difference. So he is now shifting the string back from where I took it over to other expenses like coffee to things that he wanted to talk about. Now, unfortunately, sometimes people who are competitive, they have patterns of threats and violence. We hate to see that, but sometimes they'll throw something, they'll hit something. In the worst case, actually can hit a person. Now, a competitive person, what do they need? A competitive person is very task-oriented. They're coming in with a task, and you've got to meet that task. They want to talk frank. They want to talk quickly. They don't want to beat around the bush. And if you know someone who's very competitive, that's what you've got to do. You've got to keep it on the task, move very quickly through it, and stay on the task and speak very frankly. They are very persuasive, and they insist upon the action. And let me tell you something else about competitive people. They remember everything. Now, this kind of goes back to a thought about the part of your limbic system in your brain, which is called the amygdala. And they used to say at one point that people with a larger amygdala had a better memory. Or is it the better the memory, the larger the amygdala? But the amygdala is something that kind of affects your fight or flight. So what they're saying is that competitive people quite often have a little larger amygdala, and that's why they remember things so much. Your memory, your long-term memory, is your thalamus and your hippocampus. So they have better memories. They remember things, and at the same time, they got that fight or flight moving, that they're going to fight you or they're going to get out of the way. So they have to feel like they're in control. Now, what do they need? They need information. And they want to talk to you directly, and they want specifics. Now, if you were to take the Thomas Kilmann online assessment, you will be able to tell what you are of these 5. Are you competitive, accommodative, collaborative, avoidant, or, oh my gosh, can't remember the other one in there. The avoidant, accommodative, and collaborative, and compromiser. There we go. And you realize that you're not all one or the other. You may be a very strong competitive person, or maybe you're a very strong accommodative, or you may be a fairly strong competitive and a fairly strong accommodative person too. So that's a nice thing about taking that assessment. Now let's talk about the accommodative person. You probably know people who are accommodators out there. And what they do is they'll pretty much say, sure, whatever, fine, okay, I agree with it. And this kind can foster some undertones that they feel like they are being one up by the other person, that the other person is trying to take advantage of them. And this could also be shown as a sign of weakness. Someone who gives in all the time, you think, oh, they're weak. They don't have a backbone. They're spineless. Those are some of the phrases they use, when actually that's not always the case. Matter of fact, what they do is they want to please people. They'll agree with everything, and to them, nothing is a big deal. But watch out. Accommodative people, they are keeping track of how many times they give in. And one day they're going to say, I have given in for the past 3 years, and now you're going to do it my way. You're going to do what I say. And they just kind of dig their heels in. So what do you need to do with a accommodative person? You need to stay light. Don't get serious with them. Appreciate their kindness and use a little humor. And when you do that, they start sensing that you know that you see them as a real person, a person who you respect. And instead of just giving in, they start talking to you more and more. Now you say, why don't I want them to give in? Because I'm getting my way. Well, the reason why is because sometimes accommodative people, and I'm one of them, you know, we may give in, but we're going to be passive aggressive. we may give in now, but we're going to get our way somewhere in the back. So that's the reason why you don't just want someone to give in. You want them to really think about it and get that mutual decision in there. Now, the avoider. I'm also an avoider too. So if you looked at my Thomas Kilmann schedule, you see that I'm an avoider and an accommodator. We deny things. We do topic management. Just like, for example, if my cousin came to me and said, we need to lay off these people, you know what I would tell him? I would say, you know what? I think that's something we need to talk about. I'm going to go to lunch, and when we come back, we'll talk about it. Well, then my cousin comes to my office and goes to my secretary like 2 hours later and say, you know, Randy's not here. Where is he? And she said, oh, he called in and said he wouldn't be back and he had to go to a doctor's appointment. You go, okay, whatever. So then I come in the next day and he says, you know, we really need to talk about this. We need to lay off. It sounds like we're always laying off people, but it's a great example because that's something that really causes you to think hard about it. So he says, we really need to think about laying off people. And I said, you know what? We do. I put you on the calendar to talk about this on Tuesday. He said, but today's Wednesday. I said, oh, I know it. Gotta wait a whole week. So here comes next Monday, and he comes to my office, and I'm not there. And he comes to my office and goes to my secretary, where's Randy? And she said, oh, he's on 2 weeks of vacation. Okay, I'm being silly about this. That's an avoider. We will find every way we can to change topics, to be non-committal, and we'll even make irrelevant remarks, joking about things. That's sometimes how you can spot those avoiders. So do you handle avoiders sometimes? You come into contact with them. Well, what do they need and what are they? Okay, they will withdraw very easily, but they're very highly focused on data, which means that the more data you give them, the less likely they are to run away. If you sit there and say, okay, here it is, take it low, keep it, like I said here, keep it low key, take it slow, paraphrase, keep things calm. They'll stay at the table and they'll talk, and you give them data. Now, it says in here they may explode. That's true. Avoiders, I'm an avoider, just like an accommodator. If I'm always giving in, or if I'm always getting up and trying to find ways to get away from a decision, eventually I look at myself and I say, I'm a worthless person. I cannot ever make a decision. And then the next time someone comes to me and they say something, they may expect me to accommodate. I may explode and say, no, I'm not going to do it. We're going to do it this way. So always watch out. Avoiders and accommodators do have a tendency sometimes to explode. The compromiser, I'll do this if you do that. We'll meet halfway. Usually is seen as a win-lose or lose-lose. Very seldom do you see it as a win-win. Compromisers sometimes are what we call a monopoly on the brain. If you ever play Monopoly, you know, I'll give you Baltic in St. James Place for Boardwalk. You know, you're always trading things back and forth. And let me tell you, it doesn't always work that way. The reason why I say that is that, you know, you see that coin that's cut in half. I used to work at a bank. My first job out of college was working in a bank. And I was a college kid, and I was a teller. And I remember this fraternity kid coming in, and there's 3 of them. And what they had done is that they had taken a $20 bill, cut it in half. And by the way, you know, if you take part of money to the bank, they will replace it with real money, with a whole bill. So if you take part of a bill to the bank, they will replace it. And then as the bank, we send it to the Federal Reserve. So they took this $20 bill and they cut it right in half. And one of them took it to the motor bank where I was, and the other one went inside the lobby of the bank. And they went to the teller, and both of these frat guys, I shouldn't be that way, fraternity guys, gave it to the tellers expecting to get a whole bill. So what they were doing, taking a 20, cut in half, thinking they're going to walk out with 40. Well, unfortunately, what you have to remember is when you split things in half, sometimes nothing gets done with it. And that's the case with the Federal Reserve. You do not give them a new bill unless they can produce 51%. Not 50, but 51%. And neither one of the guys could produce 51%. So we ended up taking it because you had defaced money at that point. So they walked in with a 20 and left with nothing. So a compromiser, what do you have to do? You got to be very direct with them. And you had to explain to them, cutting it down the middle doesn't always mean that both parties are going to win. You got to be very logical. I'm going to give you kind of a little brief example here, and this is what I call who gets the orange. And think about this. You have two sisters. They both are going to the party tonight at the town hall. The mayor tells one sister make an orange cake and tells the other sister make an orange pie. Well, the problem is they go home and their mother says, we've only got one orange. Well, both of them says, I need a whole orange. I need a full orange for my pie. The other says, I need a full orange for my cake. Well, what do you do? What does the mother do? Well, she can't go to the store because the store is over 40 miles away and they've only got 1 hour to get this made. They can't go to the neighbor because the neighbor already says, I don't have an orange. Well, can they make a half a pie or half a cake? No, you can't do that. That's embarrassing. Hey, you're a terrible parent at that point because when they go in, the mayor says, what? A half a cake, a half a pie? So that's not even an option. So what does the mother do? Does she go in there and say, well, we're just going to do a cake and we can't do the pie, or we're just going to do the pie and not the cake? Well, once again, you've made one daughter happy and the other one's will be very embarrassed when she goes in with nothing. So what do they do? Think about that for a second. What do they do? What does the mother do? Well, let me tell you what the mother does. The mother says to one girl who's making the pie, what part of the orange do you need? And that girl says, I need the juice. I need the orange juice to put into the filling. The mother turns to the other daughter and says, you're making a cake. What do you need? And that daughter says, well, for the orange frosting, I need the rind. You know, I need to scrape little bits off of the rind to flavor that frosting. She doesn't need the juices, nor does the girl making the pie need the rind. So can one orange make a cake and a pie? In this case, yes. And how did we figure this out? By the mother asking questions. So that is what you do. That's how you create the mutual gain. Once again, you can't split the orange down the middle and give half to each one of them because they both needed the full orange. But if you ask questions, you kind of find that, maybe that there's a way to get to that mutual gain. And that's what collaborators will do. Collaborators are very big about trying to find those mutual gains. They're looking for those integrative solutions. They go into conversations being very concerned. They never use I. They're kind of like the we. We're going to do this and let's see what we can do. And they're very big about trying to get win-wins. But the problem, if you turn out to be a collaborator, if you know collaborators, is that they unfortunately want to talk too much. For them, information is very critical, and they try to assert themselves as being the mediator or the person who's trying to negotiate everything. And that sometimes creates hard feelings because they may try too hard to create happiness. And if you try too hard to create happiness and there's too much discussing about things, eventually the whole thing falls apart. And once again, that creates what we call as an impasse. And the impasse is when everything falls apart. So what do collaborators need? They need to ask your opinion, and you need to ask their opinion. Ask them what they want and get them off of trying to be the mediator between two people or between you and them, and say, what do you want? And get them to talk about it. They want information. They want to feel like they're making progress in there. So basically, like I said, you have got 5 different styles: the competitive, accommodative, the avoidant, the compromiser, and the collaborative. We're all one, probably we're more than one. We may be higher in one and next higher in another. So quite often we are 2 of those styles. And what I just told you is when you're seeing somebody and how they act, their conflict styles, if they're avoiding, if they're accommodating, if they're competitive, think about some of these little tactics I gave you to help you to be a better negotiator with them, but also to avoid those conflicts. Now, conflict has some communications that really can always help to avoid them. Some of these phrases are things like, can you tell me more? This is, quite often the problem with conflict is that the communication breaks down, and sometimes you have to say to them, tell me more about what you want, what's going on. Explain to me what you mean by that. Or you can sit there and paraphrase by saying, what I'm hearing you is you're saying this, or how would it help you if I did this compared to that? And you can read all these down here. So the concept that you're trying to get here is number 7. Let's consider brainstorming. Let's consider different ideas. Let's try to think about what we both need. Now, folks, a competitive person, that goes against them. Oh, that just rubs them the wrong way. But if you pull them into it and say, I want to make you happy, but let's see what I need to do to make you happy. And then after you find that out, say, these are the things I need. This is how you make a good negotiation. My last slide I want to show you here is this little picture here. It says, what do you see? I don't know if you see anything in there or not, but take a look around. Do you see the three frogs? There's one that is tan in the bottom left corner. There's a brown one in the bottom right corner, and there's a gray one near the top in the center. So this whole picture is saying that sometimes there's stuff out there that you cannot see, but actually is out there. And that's the case in conflict, is that you don't know what's going on. You don't know what that person's experienced the day before. You don't know if you said something that's triggered an emotion. You don't know what their different management styles or conflict style is, if they're competitive or they're accommodative or an avoidant. So you ask questions, and it is not their job to give you the information. It's your job to get as much information as you can so that you can avoid a conflict and actually work out for a mutual gain. I hope you enjoy this part 2 of conflict management. And if you got any questions, please Google things. You'll be surprised what you can find when you Google and you get great answers. We'll talk to you again.